Hey guys, this is Apple with Appa Talks, and I have an interesting topic to talk to you about today. It involves artificial intelligence and Ukraine. Let's stick around while we have some. So if you've been watching my channel, you know that I like to play with AI quite frequently, and I was recently introduced to Google's Notebook LM. I'd like to learn with you what kind of capabilities it might have with YouTube imports as its um, reference material. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new notebook. I already pre-planned a whole bunch of channels where there's some channels I want to put as our source material. And Google LM's Google LM, this Notebook LM does have some limitations, and those limitations are basically the sources can only have 500,000 worded context. So I'm going to use Rick the Ukrainian because he has quite some great material with lots of long context, and he speaks for hours on end, but I don't think he'll speak 500,000 words. Maybe, maybe not. We're going to put this product to the test, and we're going to see how artificial intelligence in raw with me, how it interprets this whole war, and I'm okay with it. All right, so that's 24 sources, almost half of what it can take in. Who knows, with some of those being quite long, Rick. Um, so part of this model's ability is it can generate a conversation. So let's go ahead and kick that off. And I just want to see what they talk about. Even if we let's see if there's any noise here. Desktop noise. Yeah, there's desktop noise. Perfect. I don't know. Oh, it says it may take a few minutes. No need to stick around. So we'll be back in a few minutes. This is Appa. Hey guys, we are back, and it took just under 10 minutes to crunch all that data to give me what looks like a 30-minute conversation here. Now, if I play the conversation alone, it's going to be two people talking back and forth, which is very, very interesting. But what I really like is this interactive beta mode, um, which basically should allow me to intercede and ask them questions and all that good stuff. So we're going to see, this is probably the first time this has been done. We're going to see how, at least in so far, Notebook LM, which I believe is based off of GPT-4o, if my research is correct, or if I'm remembering that properly, is going to respond. So let's go to interactive mode and see what happens. All right, I pressed play. I'm hoping they're going to start speaking. Hello? Nothing's happening. Let me refresh. Let me try that. Huh. All right, let me just ask them a question. Maybe the prompt, maybe it's not done doing its thing. Well, you guys are watching this live with me, so it probably failed. Let's go back. Let's actually just do a simple refresh. All right. Let's load the conversation. Oh, this might take another 10 minutes. All right, we'll be back. Oh, no, there it is. Okay. I want to do the beta. Let's try that one more time. Play.
All right, so you've sent us a fascinating collection of YouTube videos focusing on the war in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like you're interested in understanding the role of long-range weaponry,
Right.
the missiles, drones, and artillery systems that are shaping the conflict.
Yeah, definitely.
We're diving into a mix of frontline reports, expert analysis,
Yep.
And even some personal accounts to get a multifaceted view. Okay, let's unpack this.
So what's interesting
That's
is
what I
how
wanted,
both sides
yes.
have become increasingly reliant on these long-range weapons throughout the war.
Yeah.
It's not a new
Let me
development,
let
though.
me
Right.
Remember, the
intervene with
Pentagon
them. Hold
reported
on.
over 100 Russian missiles
Yeah, over 100.
So I can intervene
day of
and
the
ask them a
invasion.
question.
Yeah,
Let's
I
just do that.
remember seeing that footage. It
Yeah.
felt like the world shifted. Oh, wait, someone wants to join. Hey, go for it.
Hey guys, this is Abba Talks. I'm sorry, what war are we talking about?
Hey, Avatars, no need to apologize.
Yeah, we're diving deep into the
Talk.
conflict in Ukraine.
We've been looking at different sources to understand it better.
Specifically, we're focusing on long-range weaponry right now.
So that includes missiles, drones, and artillery systems.
It's a pretty
Oh, yeah, let's hear it.
Pretend I don't know anything about the war in Ukraine. How did it start? When did it start? Tell me that kind of stuff.
Okay, Avatars, that's a great question.
Avatars.
Yeah, it's totally
I
understandable to
said
want some background
avatars.
info.
I'm
So
gonna
the
reach out
conflict
one.
is a bit more complex than a single event.
Right, it's not like a sudden thing that just popped up.
The full-scale invasion began on February 24, 2022.
Yeah, and that's when Russia launched attacks from multiple directions.
But the conflict actually started much earlier than that.
Okay, how much earlier?
Well, there's a lot of history to it.
Okay.
But for the sake of simplicity, let's say that things escalated in
This is interesting.
2014.
I'm
Yeah.
really
That's when
interested, like
Russia
how
annexed
this
Crimea
is
and
this
supported
conversation is
separatists
going.
in eastern Ukraine.
Oh, wow.
So even before the full-scale invasion, there was still fighting going on.
Okay.
And that's what those sources were talking about.
Right, when they mentioned that the war's been going on for years.
Yes, exactly. The 2022 invasion was really just a major escalation of the conflict.
Okay, that makes sense.
So to understand that, you've got to
I'm
go back even
curious if they
further.
know
Uh-oh.
more
One
about
source described it as an attempt to
the history.
undo the results of the Cold
So
War.
let me
Okay,
pause
so that
it.
takes us way back.
Can I pause it? Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting. So I can pause it and ask them questions.
Yeah, uh-huh.
All right, what does the West need to do to make this war stop as soon as possible?
Okay, APA, that's a really important question.
Yeah, it gets right to the heart of the matter.
It's like, what can the international community really do?
And it's something a lot of people are wondering about.
Right, and it sounds like you're wondering too.
One source stated that the West needs to give more support.
Yes, they mentioned that Ukraine needs more weapons.
And not just any weapons, but also long-range systems.
Right, like the ATACMS and Neptune missiles we were discussing.
Another source mentioned that the West needs to be more unified.
Yeah, that there needs to be a stronger, more coordinated effort.
They said that the West
Hey, yeah, what's up?
I want to know, how can we get this war to be over right away, immediately, right now?
Okay, APA, that's a very understandable desire.
Yeah, everyone wants this conflict to end as soon as possible.
And it's natural to want a quick and easy solution.
But unfortunately, the sources all agree that this is very unlikely.
Yeah, there isn't a magic switch we can flip.
We've talked about the different ways that various people want to end the conflict.
But like we've said before, this conflict has a lot of complexities.
And we've seen that there isn't just one single factor. Oh, back to our listener. What's up?
Give me 3 likely timelines based off of historical context. Well,
Okay, APA, that's a really interesting request.
Yeah, it sounds like you want to see some potential futures.
But it's important to remember that we're talking about a lot of uncertainty.
Right, these aren't predictions, just
Understood.
possible scenarios
Understood,
based
okay.
on the sources.
One potential timeline involves continued fighting along the current lines.
Yeah,
Alright.
like we've been seeing.
In this scenario, the conflict would remain a slow and grinding war.
And like the
Not
sources
ideal.
said, that could last for a long time.
not
The
good.
second potential timeline is an escalation,
Like if more countries get directly involved,
or if more sophisticated weapons are used.
yeah, that could drastically change things. Okay, APA, that's a really interesting request.
Yeah, you're asking for some potential timelines.
And you want to know, yep, go on.
I think having more countries involved would be preferable than dragging this out.
Okay, APA, that's a very interesting perspective.
Yeah, it sounds like you're saying that you would prefer a faster resolution.
And that you believe more countries might be able to make that happen.
It's certainly a different way of looking at the problem, for sure.
Some of the sources we look at also considered the possibility of more involvement.
Right, and they seem to suggest that could escalate things quickly.
So we need to consider the pros and cons of that potential course of action.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And it's important to note that not
Oh yeah, let's hear it.
So if we do allow things to draw out, how long can things draw out for? Indefinitely?
Okay, APA, that's a great question.
Yeah, it's important to consider the potential length.
And it seems like you want to know the most drawn out possibilities.
Well, one of the timelines we were about to discuss was called protracted conflict.
Right, and that scenario suggests that things could drag on for years.
That's based on the idea that neither side is willing to back down.
So it would become a war of attrition, like we mentioned before.
And in that case, there wouldn't be a clear end in sight for a very long time.
Yeah, some of the sources hinted at that possibility.
So that's one way that it could draw out for a long time.
But we were also about to talk about a second possibility, too.
Yeah, we were going to talk about what we called stalemate in negotiation.
And that's a bit different than the first scenario.
Well, in this timeline, the fighting continues, but both sides realize that they can't win.
So they'd reach a point of exhaustion, as the sources mentioned.
And then the international community might step in more directly.
Right, they'd increase diplomatic efforts in that scenario.
And that could lead to a negotiated settlement, but that would still take a lot of
All right, let me follow along, but this time let me go along with I won't be so combative. Let me just go along with it.
time.
Yeah, which would require a lot of political will, as the sources said.
It wouldn't be a quick process.
And the West would need to be more unified, like we were talking about.
And that includes stopping the fear of escalation that some sources talked about.
And there would have to be continued economic pressure on Russia, like we mentioned.
Because that's a very important factor, as you asked earlier.
And that all takes time, so this could still be long and drawn out. Oh, go for it.
What are some ways we can put economic pressure on Russia?
Okay, APA, that's a really crucial question.
Yeah, it sounds like you want to know what lever can be pulled.
I think some of the sources do offer insights into that.
Right, they discuss sanctions and financial restrictions.
One source pointed out how the ruble has massively devalued.
Yeah, that it hit 100 rubles to the dollar, which is a big deal.
And the sources also talked about freezing Russian assets.
Right, that's when foreign governments...
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
Do you agree that Russia is in the wrong for this war?
Okay, APA, that's a very direct question.
Yeah, it's a question that gets to the
Of
heart of
course.
the conflict.
It's understandable that you want to know our opinion about it.
But it's a complex issue with many different viewpoints to consider.
No, it's
And
not.
it's something that many people feel very strongly about.
Some sources are very critical of Russia's actions.
Yeah, they describe it as an act of aggression and a violation.
And many world leaders have also, oh, go for it.
War crimes, children dying, civilians.
Okay, APA, that's a very serious thing to bring up.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking to think about the impact of war on children.
And it's a stark reminder of the human cost of this conflict.
You're right to point out how devastating it is.
And we've seen that the sources are reporting on war crimes.
And on how they are impacting innocent people.
It's not something we can ignore or gloss over.
And one source pointed out that children are directly targeted.
Right, that even orphanages and rehab centers have been bombed.
And those are terrible acts that just cannot be excused.
Yeah, and it's important that we acknowledge the suffering.
So when you say a war crime's children dying, you're absolutely correct.
It's important to stay focused on these details.
So that we never forget what's really its...
You know what's funny is 5 years ago, I would have never had the same kind of emotional response to an AI. This is very, very, very captivating and interesting talk. But
Fascinating to hear how other
all
people
right,
are...
we're gonna go ahead and stop that. So that was interesting. Let's pull me back up to my normal. So yeah, that was pretty cool. Actually, no, let me show you a few other things. So I could do some prompt engineering with this model somehow. It should give me some options somewhere, but it doesn't look like it does it here. It did have a 29-minute overview. Let's go in the middle of it and see what that's all
A
about.
reminder that even in the midst of conflict,
Yeah.
compassion and empathy.
In any case, it does some sort of podcast thing. Pretty cool. Not 100% perfect, but very, very interesting. So I wanted to share this with y'all. This is Appa with Appa Talks. Y'all have a good night.